Well, it's 2 o'clock and it's time to get started. And I'm your presenter, John Teravskis with WGR Southwest. We are what we call the organizers of Stormwater Awareness Week, but we don't refer to ourselves as the owner of Stormwater Awareness Week. This event actually belongs to all of you, and it belongs to the community. And it truly has been a community effort, as you've seen this year. Many, many top quality speakers have been joining. So we're very proud to have a role in this. And so it's been a lot of fun. But this hour, we're going to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and that is stormwater pollution prevention plans. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the stormwater industry since, well, let's put it this way. I remember when the first construction general permit came out in California in 1992. I remember standing in the office with, of course, a paper copy in my hands and going, maybe I'll dabble in this. You know, this looks interesting. Maybe I'll check it out. Maybe I could write a construction SWPPP. And never in my wildest imagination would I have thought that would have built my career. Now, I don't even want to take a poll as far as how old some of you were in 1992. I'm thinking I probably have a good percentage of my class that wasn't even born yet, or maybe in elementary school. Anyways, it's been a wild ride. And we have seen lots of changes over the years, some good, some not so good, when it comes to writing construction SWPPs. And there's been a lot of evolution in this. And so we're going to talk about some of that today. But what I really want to address is how to prepare a SWPPP. And I compare that to an exercise you probably did when you were in kindergarten. Around here at WGR, we like to have lots of fun, and you can tell we like our activities. We have a erosion control sandbox out back. We have regular play time here, even story time, and we do hand out dot-to-dot exercises like you see behind me, just to keep our QSPs sharp. Anyways, that's what we're going to compare SWPPP writing to, is a dot-to-dot exercise. Now, sadly, when I review SWPPs, and I review a lot of SWPPs, I review SWPPs for municipalities. Several municipalities outsource their erosion sediment control plan and SWPPP reviews to us. I see a lot of SWPPs that have been submitted, and sadly, in many cases, they haven't really connected the dots too well. And so it's left with a document that you're really not sure what to do with. So let's get into this. So let me advance my slide here. Right, here we go. Now I know what the other presenters feel like. All right, so yeah, let's talk about this. But first, let's talk about who writes SWPPs. Now, here in California, and this class is not going to be completely California-centric, but we are going to talk a little bit about Californians as well, too. So if you've attended some of these workshops, you've picked up on some of our California terminology, and the Qualified SWPPP Developer, or QSD, here locally is the one that needs to prepare this. And a QSD has to meet certain credentials. First off, they have what the state now calls a prerequisite. In the old permit, it was called the underlying certificate. But it was one of these options according to the 2022 CGP, a California Landscape Architect registration. I haven't seen too many of those in the SWPPP world, but I suppose they exist. A professional hydrologist registration through the American Institute of Hydrology. Again, I haven't seen a lot of those either. A certified professional erosion sediment control, a CPES through EnviroCert International. That's actually a certificate I hold. Or also EnviroCert International offers another certificate that can qualify for this, a certified professional in stormwater quality. Now, some of you go, wait a minute, you just skipped a couple. Professional engineer and professional geologist that is licensed through the state of California. that actually now in the new permits addressed in a separate paragraph, right? I think right after this section, and that still qualifies as a underlying certification. Of course, they can self-certify, and they don't need to do anything other than to say they know this material and then self-certify on SMARTS and become a QSP, QSD. And then the newest option is any prerequisite course approved by the State Water Board's Division of Water Quality Deputy Director in accordance with the section Roman numeral 5G in the permit. And that's the newest and most exciting route that we're seeing. In fact, the Water Board's been approving some. If you go to the State Water Board's website now, where they keep the construction general permit, they list out approved courses. I know one of our presenters earlier this week was John Gleason. He's got a class that's been approved for QSPs, not QSDs. I understand he's working on it, but only QSPs right now. And then there was a college that's listed that I believe has both a QSP and a QSD credential. And we have submitted two. We haven't heard back yet. Maybe we will in October, I'm told, but there are going to be more and more options coming out as far as what meets the underlying credential for a QSD. And then, of course, if you've been through this route before, you know you have to take a 3-day course by what the Water Board and California Stormwater Quality Association calls a trainer of record, or TOR is what we like to refer to them as. And some of you on this workshop may even have been in one of my classes in the past year. So there are quite a few tours that do offer this. So that is to become a QSD here in California, you need to have this. Now, here in a moment, we're going to take a look at what other states require too. But the role of a QSD, according to the new permit, is this. Let's take a look at this. So the discharger shall retain a QSD from the beginning of the project through its end, through the time the NOT, the notice of termination, is approved. So a QSD has to be associated with that project. And notice whose responsibility that is. It's the discharger, the legally responsible person's responsibility to make sure that that QSD is associated with that project. Now, does it have to be the same person? No, absolutely not. Now, a QSD does have to be associated with the project. In fact, that person needs to be actually named in SMARTS. There's actually a place, an entry place in the SMARTS application, the NOI application, to identify at least the original QSD. Now, if that role is handed off at some point, then it's going to require a SWP amendment to identify who is the new qualified SWP developer. And then that amended SWP is loaded onto SMARTS, and that is now the new QSD. So it's quite common, actually, to have the QSD who wrote the SWP be separate from the QSD who's implementing the SWP. Well, what do you mean by implementing? Well, let's press on in the new permit and see what's required now. So a QSD is required to assess how construction activities will affect sediment transport, erosion, and other discharges of pollutants and stormwater runoff in the SWP design and implementation. The QSD is required to revise the SWP to address potential problems identified by visual inspections, sampling data, comments from a QSP, or their own site observations. Mean we're going to be going out in the field? Yeah, we are. But before we move on to that, let's look at some of the language here. It says that a QSD is required to assess how construction activities will affect what? Sediment transport, erosion, and this phrase that we forget about lots of times, and other discharges of pollutants in stormwater runoff. Now, notice the action word here, assess. many times when we're connecting the dots of a SWIP, that does not necessarily get connected. And we're going to talk about that, and we're actually going to do some exercises to do some assessment. But now this requirement in the permit, a lot of us go, oh yeah, that is what a QSD does, right? They write the SWIP, and so no big surprise there. But let's press on to see what else they have to do now. So C3 says a QSD is required to include in the SWIP the name, email, and phone number of, oh, my friend Gerald, last session, one of the last sessions talked about this. QSD or QSP, excuse me, trained delegates. So now the QSD is responsible for naming them all out. And I tell a lot of people that in this new permit, it's a lot like baseball. I've told a lot of people as a kid, I loved baseball. I loved it. I ate, lived, breathed baseball. In the summertime, when I wasn't at school, I was in the park doing pickup games. Now, as much as I love baseball, I'm sorry to say I had the talent of, well, Charlie Brown. That was about my extent of baseball. But I did learn a few things about baseball. And one of them is, what does the manager do right before the game starts? Goes out to the field, hands the ump something. What is that? $20 bill? No. Handing them what? Handing them the lineup card, right? And on that lineup card, not only do we have 9 positions listed, but next to that position is a name or jersey number, but a specific person. That is how the State Water Board is handling these positions in this new permit. That the lineup card is smarts or our SWIP amendments. And we are now having to identify all these players, starting with the top, the LRP, and then moving down to the duly authorized representative, and then the QSD, the QSP, and the delegated inspector. So we're calling them all out. Now, we're not giving jersey numbers, but we're giving emails, phone numbers. Yeah, it requires that. In fact, look at there, name, email, phone number. Now, why would they want to know that? Well, guess what? We'll see that here in a moment. Well, we'll come to that. All right, so the discharger shall ensure that a QSD performs the following on-site visual inspections. On-site. Okay, just earlier today, we had a workshop that was on doing inspections by drones. I've been getting a lot of questions even this week and seeing them, excuse me, in the workshops about, could that be done virtually? Well, the permit doesn't really talk about whether it could be done virtually or not. I mean, I suppose if someone walked me around with FaceTime, and you'd like the QSP took me around with FaceTime, maybe I'm on site virtually, I don't know. But I think the intent is boots on the ground, get out in the field, take a look at what's going on. But when? Well, the first time is what I call the 30-day visit. Now, first 30-day visit. So that's either the first 30 days of the construction site starting, or that is within 30 days of a discharger replacing the QSD. You're going to need to get out there and take a look at the site. Now, the other time you're going to go out there is twice a year. Twice a year. In fact, they're specific about the time frames, August through October. What's that about? Well, that's probably a pre-rainy season visit, right? To go out and see, are they ready? Is everything per the SWIP? And then you have a January through March visit, which would be probably mid-season, right? Or during drought years here in California, towards the end of the rainy season. But it's probably mid-season to see, are things holding up? Now, the other time you're going to have to strap on your boots and go out there is within 14 calendar days of a numeric action level exceedance. And we've talked about that before, that it's going to probably be more likely under this new permit that you're going to have NAL exceedances because they're not site-wide daily averages any longer. Every sample point stands on its own merits. And then within a time period requested in writing by the water board staff. Now, in the '09 permit, we would have been like, okay, that's just a catch-all phrase. They put that in just to kind of cover their tails. I have to think that that's going to become a reality because what did they gather from us, including the QSD, the QSP, and the delegated inspectors? Up above, names, emails, and phone numbers. I have to believe that some of my friends at the regional boards, when they know they're going to be visiting a job site, they're going to look these all up and send us all an email because they have our email addresses now. Say, hey, I'm going to be out there next Tuesday. I want you to be there. That could happen. I see that happen. Very possibly could be happening. And it kind of makes sense. If they're going to be there, they want to have the players there. Have a little huddle, see what's going on. Let's talk about it. So that could very well happen. And then a QSD may perform the work of a QSP. And we've seen that come up in a couple workshops. Now, that is if John Teravskis has been written into the lineup card as both the pitcher and the catcher. Now, in baseball, you can't do that, right? It's got to be two different people. But in the stormwater world, I can be written into the lineup card, the SWIP, as both the QSD and QSP. However, if I am listed as the QSD and Andrew Fan on this call is listed as the QSP, then we both have to go out there because QSPs have the same requirement within 14 calendar days of that NAL exceedance. Now, so if you want just me doing it, then maybe I need to be written in as maybe an alternate QSP, and that certainly could work. All right, so that's a little bit about QSDs. Now, what's super interesting in all of this is when you look at a comparable section, the next section deals with QSPs, tells what a QSP has to do, just like we saw here, but then it tells them what they're looking for. Kind of interesting, the water board never told us QSDs what we're actually looking for. They just said, go out there. What? Buy a burrito from the truck? They didn't tell us what we had to do. Now, common sense would have that, we're going to be looking at BMPs or failures, right? Certainly if we had an NAL exceedance. But I find it kind of interesting they didn't tell us. So what I've decided to do is when I'm out there, I'm going to do activities that QSD should be doing, like looking at the SWIP map, comparing to actual conditions. Do we have anything that's not matching up? Do we need to make some changes to our SWIP map? I also have now made it, at least in our company, the responsibility of QSD to maintain that material inventory we're going to be talking about here in a moment. Since I'm going to be out there, I might as well, right? And also the spill kits and spill supplies. And now BMPs have got to be maintained. So I've made it the responsibility of the QSD during these inspections to do things that would allow me to amend my SWIP and make it all that much more accurate to actual site conditions. So well, I guess the water board left it up to our discretion, but that's how I'm going about it. You can buy a burrito if you want, but that's what I'm doing. All right, so now here's the deal. The new permit also talks about what needs to go into a SWIP, and we can go through this. I'm going to go through this really quickly. If you want to get a copy of the new 22 CGP, if you're doing projects in California, that'd be a great idea if you haven't done so already. There's a QR code there. Now, there's a list here of very specific things that need to go in SWIP. And what I would really recommend is that you go through this. And what I have found is actually that when I compare this to the 2009 permit, I found some very subtle but very real opportunities to streamline our SWPs. Now, not only me, but many of my colleagues in this field have felt that the SWP sizes have been getting out of hand. I mean, when we were preparing SWPs using very common industry standards here in California, our SWPs were starting to weigh in at 300, 350, 400 plus pages. Now, when I hand a contractor a document that thick in a big 3-ring binder, are they going to want to read that? No, I don't want to read it. I wrote it. That, to me, when you hand somebody a document that thick, that's self-defeating. That is self-defeating. That's almost guaranteeing that they won't read it. And so we've really been hoping that our industry will get to a point where we provide a document that checks all the buttons, that is fully compliant, but is streamlined. And I feel that this new permit does give us some opportunities to do that. So what I've done, and I'll show you an example here in a moment, I basically used this slide and the next ones you're going to see, excerpts out of the permit, and I use that as my checkbox, my checklist, I should say, to create my own SWP. And anyone who has some experience at writing SWPs should be able to do this. It's pretty straightforward stuff and stuff that, frankly, we've been exposed to over the last, 10 years. So go through here. It talks about a site-specific SWP is developed. It's got to be site-specific. In fact, that's my whole thing is, if someone's going to pick up a SWP, I want them, one, not be intimidated by size, two, be assured it's fully compliant, and three, as they look at it, they go, this is all about my site. This is about us. And not think, what boilerplate fluff is this? Not to say the other templates are fluff, but it's a lot of pages. So it should be a site-specific SWP is developed and amended, of course, by the QSD. Trained personnel and BMP materials are available at the site, and the SWP needs to comply with standards, BAT, BCT. And then the SWP needs to be made available at the site. Now, no longer paper, other than one thing. If you read that paragraph there, you'll notice what it is. It's the map. The map needs to be paper. And I'll show you a little bit more here in a second as far as how we do that. Now, I'm not going to go into detail here because I want to move on and talk about connecting dots. But if you are going to create your own SWP, then go through these and make sure you are identifying all those. But pay attention to B right here. And we're going to kind of camp there a little bit. Actually, let's back up to A. We'll look at A and B here because that's really where we're going to focus on. First off, the SWP shall do this. It needs to identify all the pollutants. Notice the words being used here. All the pollutants, their sources, and what else? Control mechanisms, including sources of sediment associated with construction activity, then gives a list of examples. And then the next one, a phrase that often loses meaning in our industry, unfortunately, is a pollutant source assessment, including a list of potential pollutant sources and identification of site areas where additional BMPs are necessary to reduce and prevent pollutants in stormwater and authorized non-stormwater discharges. And it goes through what needs to happen there as far as what goes into that, such as considering your sources, where are they coming from, how are they stored, do you have anything that might have a TMDL associated with it? What are the physical characteristics? Is it a liquid? Is it a powder? Is it something you're producing? Is it a waste? Is it a byproduct? Consider the degree to which the pollutants associated with those materials may be exposed or mobilized by stormwater, and then consider direct and indirect pathways that pollutant might be exposed in stormwater. Now, whether you're in California or not in California, those are good things. That is good SWP design. That should be in every SWPPP, no matter what state you're in. All right, let's go to the next slide here. And it goes into describe specific BMPs. And again, I want to really focus on one area in particular. So let's move on. I'm going to put up a poll here. If you would answer this for me, what state are you from? Go ahead and type it in. I want to see. Are you all from California? Or maybe you're not from a U.S. state. Maybe you're from outside of the United States, but in the country. I want to see who we're talking to today. So if you don't mind, put that in. I see a lot of you voting. This will be very interesting. All right. All right. Just another second. If you haven't voted, hurry up and do that. All right. We're gonna grab it there, and I'm gonna share the results. Let's see what we got here. I think I'm sharing. Maybe you're not. Well. Well, I'm not sure what happened to the results. I'm sorry.
I think if you click the view details.
Okay, there it is, maybe. Thank you, Rebecca. What do I do without my tech people? Let's see. All right, well, I apologize for that. You know what, while I'm talking, let's just do it the old-fashioned way. I tried to get too fancy. Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. I'd love to see where you're from. So, yeah, put it in the chat. And if you see your state already listed, then all right. We got a lot of Californias, I see. Anybody not? All right, Missouri. All right, great. Alberta. All right. Awesome, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Good deal. Hawaii. All right. All right. Good. Denial. The state of denial. That had to be my brother. All right. All right, Oregon. All right, good. Well, thank you very much. Now, here's the deal. I'm showing you on the screen here. Let me get rid of this. All right. On the screen here, I have a table that I produced. Rebecca helped me produce that. Let me bring that up here. The screen here. I opened it earlier. Here it is. And if you want that, there's a QR code where you can download this table. But we actually went state by state by state in the 50 states to look at a couple things. First off, what is their permit for the construction general permit? And who can prepare a SWPPP? You might find this interesting. Now, some states have some very specific requirements. Other states is pretty open-ended. But I was actually surprised to find how many states have something very similar to California. Now, you know, some are anyone, the owner, but there are places that have very specific requirements. And we also wanted to see in those states, was a certain template required? Because there are some states that require a certain template. In fact, it tends to be more a form that they're filling out for their SWPPP. So when you got time, or if you're from outside of California, especially, take a look at this table. We call it Table 11, and it's out of a resource that we'll talk about a little bit later. All right. So, oops. Move on here. So let's do the exercise here. We got 30 minutes remaining, and I want to connect some dots. So this is, as far as having a program, a stormwater management program, these are the dots we're typically looking at. Erosion and sediment theory, it's really important. If you don't understand that, you're not going to be able to connect dots. That pollutant source assessment. And that's where we're really going to focus a lot of time at, but also best management practices, SWPPP development, an effective monitoring program, and finally, the final dot number in this drawing, 36, is to get that site stabilized. And so let's take a look at the pollutant source assessment. And for this dot-to-dot exercise, we're going to be looking at the various steps involved here. Now, I was picking on some templates. Now templates are great things. Without templates, it would be really hard to write a comprehensive SWPPP every time. We got to use them. It speeds things up. They're necessary. I kind of consider them a necessary evil. And yes, even the SWPPP I wrote became a template. And there's lots of positive things with it, but there's a few negative things. One of the negative things is when we use a template, lots of times we can start falling into a pattern of writing SWPPs, what I would consider kind of formulaic. In other words, it is a cookbook recipe SWPPP. So like when we get to the BMP section, we know, okay, I'll pick one track out control, 3 DI protections, and one perimeter control, and street sweeping. I got to have that. And oh yeah, some sort of erosion control. And it becomes very cookbook-like, and it kind of takes that thinking process out. And that doesn't always produce a subpar SWPPP, but when we have those difficult projects, it can lead to maybe not completely understanding the nuances of the situation and not specifying the SWPPs and not addressing the true pollutants. And so we shortcut sometimes by using a template, the process. Now the permit here in California, most of you are from California, the permit calls it the pollutant source assessment. And so here's what goes into it. We first identify activities. So I have a picture up here. And in your, I'm afraid to use my poll. We're just going to have you do this in the chat. In your chat, type in how many trades do you see present? In fact, not the number. I want names of trades. Start listing them out. If you see it already listed, then list a different one. Now, notice in this picture, you don't see a living soul. Not a single person. You don't see a single person. But I bet you we see evidence of lots of trades. How many can we come up with? Let's see. So we have mason, roofer, civil grading, HVAC, framers, landscaping. Well, not yet, but there will be. Electrician, plumbing, concrete, asphalt. That's 10. We're up to 10. Drywall, utility work. Yeah, well, we'll count that. Now we already counted plumbing. All right, water connection. I'll give you that. All right, but we're only at 12. Think inside the house. What's going on inside the house? Especially that one that already has stuff on there. Painting. All right, 13. Tyler, stucco. All right, 15, you're doing better. I think we can get to 25. What else? Cabinetry. All right, 16. Come on. What? Finished carpentry, all right, kind of cabinetry, but we'll give it to you. 17. What goes on the floor? Windows, yeah. Tile, we already listed tile and landscaping. But if you're not going to use tile, what are you going to use? Carpet or flooring, right? All right, 19. Insulation, 20. All right, can we do 5 more? I bet you can. All right, we already got those. Alarm, very good. How about on the roofs these days? What's going on the roofs these days other than roofing tiles? Solar, very good, very good. All right, well, for the interest of time, we're at 22. You did okay. You did okay, but there's actually quite a bit. Now, have you ever thought about all those trades when it comes to SWPs? No. In fact, what's kind of sad is a lot of SWP writers come right out of school. How many days have they spent on a construction site? Do they even know what trades are present? And lots of times that's where a big disconnect happens is when we're preparing SWPs, we don't know what we're looking at. We don't know who's actually working there. And we don't know what's involved in what they're doing. So understanding the trades, understanding who's there when, and in fact, phasing, this is where phasing becomes really important. Like who's there at this particular time. But as we then move into interior work, who's going to be there? So part of connecting the dots is this pollutant source assessment where we're listing out the trades, but then we're taking a look at, okay, but what do they do? Do you even know they do? Like carpenters, what are carpenters doing? Well, they're using wood, right? And if they're using wood products, then what kind of pollutants do are associated with that? So obviously they're cutting wood, there's dust, there's particulate. If they're using treated wood, then there might be semi-volatile organics in that or metals. If they're cutting steel studs, aluminum studs, then there's going to be metal dust and filings. Of course, there's solid waste and trash with everyone. How about electricians? What do electricians have? Well, they're going to have solid waste, of course, from all the wire stripping that they're doing. They have metal grindings and particulate matter. The electricians do a lot with PVC, so they're going to have PVC glues and primers, and even the roofers. And so if you go through these, you can look at, all right, here's the trades, here are the activities, here are the potential pollutant sources. This is what makes the SWPP very site specific. And so what we do is we give our the person we're writing the SWPP for, we give them a questionnaire with a fairly comprehensive list of all the trades and say, all right, which ones are going to be present during this project? Just cross out the ones that won't be present. And that will give us more indication of as far as what we're going to have. So again, your trades, then connecting your dots, identifying activities, because how do you know what's going on out there if you don't know who's out there? And then the activities will tell you what chemicals, what materials are they using. And so we're connecting the dots. All right, here's another picture. It's kind of the same exercise. In your chat, type in for me, what pollutants do we have present? Now, I'm going to take the first obvious one out of the way, dirt, sediment, right? Okay, that's what we always talk about. Beyond that, what pollutants do you see present or evidence that they may be present? Go ahead and start listing out. Petroleum. Yes. Yes. You see the diesel can right in the center? Yes. Paint. Sealant. Cold patch. Stucco. Yes. And when we talk about stucco, that is not just necessarily what's on the wall, right? What goes into stucco? If you've been around stucco and seen it out in the field, there's a lot of other things potentially there, like curing compounds, colorants, which could be high in metals. There's, of course, stucco itself is high in pH. It's a cementitious material. What else we got? Tile roof cuttings, tar, drywall. Yeah, drywall can be nasty. Oil coming off the machinery, oil coming off the asphalt. Uh, okay, so if you're putting in concrete forms, does anybody know what gets sprayed on concrete forms? Form oil, right? Have you ever seen them with a Hudson sprayer out there spraying the forms? They're spraying oil onto the forms, and guess what? It doesn't just go on the forms. Yeah, trash people. Oh, that's a little cynical. What else? What else we got? Drywall mud. Yes, very good. Very good. Plastic. Yes. Some use diesel in lieu of form oil. Not recommended. If you see them doing that, suggest they go back to form oil, especially an environmental friendly form oil. Insulation materials. Yes. Um, if you're new to this field, you know the best thing you could do is go visit a job site like this and hang out for a while. I mean, really hang out for a while and go snooping in their trailers, in the garages, and around the job sites with the sole purpose of looking for materials. Remember what I was saying, what a QSD now needs to do? Well, the water board didn't say what I need to do, but that's what I decided to do when the water board told me I needed to be out there is I'm snooping. I'm trying to come up with a list that you're coming up with right here. And I've learned a lot. And I've been around construction, well, more years than I want to admit. Yeah. Yeah, if you see a 5 gallon bucket, stop and take a look at that. What is that 5 gallon bucket? Don't just assume it's paint. And go online, download the safety data sheet to get some information about what that is. Yeah, look in their dumpsters. So, okay, so what pollutants do we have present? That is one of our dot to dots that we're connecting. So then comes the next thing is connect the dots in the SWPPP. We need to connect those dots in the SWPPP, and that's where our pollutant source assessment is happening. We're identifying those materials. We've identified the activities. And then remember what that permit said is not just the materials, but what's the nature of the material? Is it a powder? Is it a liquid? Does it have direct exposure to stormwater or indirect exposure to stormwater or both? Well, what would be an example? Well, let's take stucco. Stucco usually comes in bags. Now, a direct exposure would be the stucco we mix up and we put on the wall, or as we're putting it there, if it rains, we have direct exposure. Or spills of stucco powder, we can have direct exposure. Indirect exposure would be, what did we do with that bag? Threw it in the trash, right? That's probably why the water board wants you to cover the trash at the end of every business day, is because if the rain falls on the stucco bag, even though it's empty, mostly in the trash, we still have pollutants mobilizing off of that indirectly from that solid waste that's in the trash that just got washed out by the rain and is now flowing out the cracks and holes in the bin. So that is a dot that we need to connect. In fact, it's a requirement in the new construction general permit. And then it also talks about in the permit, how much do you store? Where do you store it? So all of those are what has to go into the pollutant source assessment. So we did our pollutant source assessment. Now we need to identify some BMPs. So let's quickly look at some BMPs. There are great standards out there. CASCA for years has been the gold standard and still is of BMP fact sheets. And for those of you, I use an acronym, some of you might not understand, California Stormwater Quality Association, CASCA. They have very good BMP fact sheets. But what we're needing to do, though, is not just what I see a lot of SWPPP writers do, is take the entire library of the CASCA BMP fact sheets and put it into an appendix. What dot have you connected there? None, other than make that fat SWPPP fatter. That's all you've done. You need to connect the dot. Like, okay, you had a trade, and that trade's doing an activity, and that activity involves certain materials, and that material is exposed in certain ways. So, what fact sheet should we be drawing from? Whether you're doing a Caltrans job and using a Caltrans fact sheet or doing your own fact sheet, it doesn't matter, but you do need to connect those dots. And your BMP should not be because the cookbook says 3 cups of DI protection and 1 pound of chopped track out control. No, it should be because we have this activity, therefore I need this BMP. It needs to be a dot-to-dot connection. All right, so let me move on just because of time. Examples of connected BMPs might be here, where we talk about spill prevention program. If I have oils and fuel on site, which most, if not every job site has, I need to make sure I have a spill prevention and cleanup program identified in my SWPPP, and not just say, yeah, we're going to respond to spills, but where's the spill kit? What spill kit do we have? Is it big enough to handle what we have? So if about as big of a container I'm going to have is a couple 5-gallon cans, then maybe I can go with a smaller kit. But if I have a 10,000 gallon double wall tank on site, maybe it's going to need to be a little more. Or I got a mobile refueler coming in every day, then it probably needs to be more. So you want to connect those. Here's one of my favorite BMPs that we've kind of come up with is also BMP that addresses expectations and enforcement. Clear communication and enforcement of compliance expectations is the most important BMP to implement. Without communicating expectations, no one will know what is required of them. Without enforcing expectations, no one will think you're serious about it. If the manager is lackadaisical or ambivalent about this SWPPP and permit compliance, then that attitude will be observed and caught by on-site personnel, and the site conditions will reflect it. Not implementing this BMP will undo and undermine the rest of the BMPs. So here are some specific things we're going to do. Now, when we're writing the SWPPP, we don't just make this, here's ideas. What the intent is choose the ones you're really going to implement, and maybe not all of them need to be implemented, but choose the ones to meet the intent of that BMP. So that's a connected BMP, making sure that what we actually spec actually happens, and then linear sediment controls. All right, let's move on. So best management practices now to SWPPP development. And so our SWPPP development, I'll just pop this open real quick. Let me open this. Again, this is something you could do. This is just a template we created based on what the CGP says. And ours is weighing in, it ranges between 70 and 90 pages, where, it's still a little fatter than I wanted it, but it's not as intimidating as the 350-page document. So you might take a look at this. Now, how did we get it so thin? Well, one, we just did what the permit said. And second, not to say anything disparaging about any of the other templates, because they are good templates. They are very good templates. Casca is a good template. Caltrans is a good template. But how we got it thinner is we narrowed our audience. For example, the Casca template, it gives information to anybody that needs to know anything about that stormwater program for that site, be it QSB, QSD, regulator, LRP, whoever might be. In ours, we narrowed the audience to really address the contractor, the person who's doing the work. What does that person need to do? And if there's a secondary audience, it's the owner. What does the owner need to know about this? But that's how we narrowed it. But literally, we took those sheets out of the constructor general permit and checked. addressed it, checked it off. And so we know it's 100% compliant. And guess what? I put in some extra stuff that the water board didn't require. You want to know what it is? Well, things like WDID number, that wasn't identified in the list. Risk level, it wasn't identified in the list either. Huh. But I thought that was pretty important, so we put it in. But you can do the same thing if you want. Some of you, if you're doing Caltrans projects only, sorry, you got to do a Caltrans template. It's just the way it is, a contractual thing. But if you want to take on the challenge of it, but the idea is, regardless of what template you're using, connect those dots, connect them. So you can see some of the connection here in the organization. Let me bring open, let's see, this will give you a little better view of it. So you can, we give a little bit of permit information and then information about the project. We like to include photos, and then we'll identify the pollutant generating activities. Here's that list I was talking about. And then, I'm sorry, move into the pollutant source assessment. So you notice that table, you should recognize some of these. And actually, sometimes we have to write SWPs super early before we have some of this information. So what we do is we put a big red text box there saying, this table will be completed after the QSD's first visit. Here's, and we won't keep it empty. We'll take a best guess effort at it, but we'll say it will be revised upon each QSD and then updated after each QSD visit. All right, I want to just move on because the time is getting short. So our handouts now, here's 3 SWP copies, about 80 pages long. Remember, now WDIDs need to be hung up, so we laminate 11 by 17 sign, hole punch it. This one doesn't have holes in it, but we hole punch it and provide zip ties to put onto the gate or fence. And then the one thing that needs to be paper is the map. And we now send that out for printing as a 24 by 36 inch Tyvek map where it's pretty durable. And we recommend they hang that up on the job site trailer if they have one and mark it up as they go. And then as they mark it up, of course, that has to be, any changes has to be done by a QSD. So what we tell them to do is, hey, so you want to move the porta potty. All right, cool. Show me, where you're going to move it, mark it up, and then take a picture of it using your smartphone and text it to me. And if it looks good, I'll send you back a text and there's your QSD verification. If it, I might go, no, how about we not put it over the drain inlet, maybe 50 feet away? That would be better, so I might give some feedback there, but that's a way to stay engaged, keep your SWPs connected. All right, so SWP development, then of course, a part of this connecting the dots is something we prefer not to do. And that is monitoring. I mean, who enjoys monitoring? None of us enjoy monitoring. Who wants to be out there in the rain collecting it? But guess what? It's a necessary evil, because without a monitoring program, you don't know that your SWP is connected. You have no way of knowing it. You got to get boots on the ground, eyes in the field, and what does that water look like that's discharging? Is it turbid? Does it have a funny smell to it? Does it have floatables? What's the pH? Are we outside of 6.5 and 8.5? Is our turbidity above 250? Because all of that will then allow us to assess, is our SWP connected? Have we connected the dots? Without that information, we don't know. That's why I am glad that, well, some days I'm glad that the water board's making me go in the field. That after an NAL exceedance, I need to get out there. What's going on? Something's disconnected. Something's not working. What's going on? Oh, they didn't install any of the BMPs I spec'd. Well, that could be it. Or maybe they did, and we're still having problems. maybe I, as a SWP writer, need to now evaluate what's going on here. All right, so that's the monitoring program. And then, of course, use your data, use it 72 hours. If you have an NAL exceedance, you got 72 hours to begin corrective action and then complete as soon as possible. And then there's reporting requirements. Now in the new permit, you got to upload that data every 30 days, regardless if you've had an NAL exceedance or not. And then if you've had an NAL exceedance, you got to upload it in 10 days. But make sure you're looking at it and using it. And then finally, that takes us to the last dot, and that is that a good SWP does need to identify our site stabilization. There's been some workshops already on this week, one looking at Russell earlier this week, but really part of your SWP should be, how are we going to get here? Now, I see a couple mistakes. I'm watching my time here. I see a couple mistakes done when it comes to this. All too many SWPs only identify final stabilization. Like they'll say, all right, we're going to landscape this. Well, yeah, 3 years down the road, you're going to landscape it. But what's that going to look like between now and 3 years from now? Those areas of soil disturbance. So I see a lot of SWPs that don't address temporary stabilization. They only address permanent. But I also see a lot of SWPs do the vice versa, where they only address the temporary, but they don't really tell us how we're going to get to here, 70% final cover, or a fully stabilized site. So it's really important to address your temporary erosion control measures, but also your permanent final erosion control measures. All right, maybe I did it intentionally, but I hogged all the time. But any quick questions? I only got about 3 minutes. Oh, and by the way, shameless plug here. Guess what? I wrote a book. Yeah, it was one of my career things. I figured I'm old enough now, I should write a book. And it's coming out. It's at the publisher right now. It's called The Raindrop Connection. It's about 200 and, I don't know, 40 pages or something. We'll see how much it turns out once they're done with it. But yeah, wow. I became a grandfather this year and I wrote a book. Wow, lots of boxes checked. All right, I only have a couple minutes. You know what? Rather than type it in, if you want to say something, unmute. But we'll have to cut it off in about 2 minutes. Anybody? All right, let me check the chat here. All right, well, I do appreciate it. And my contact information is, you can contact me. Let me throw it in there right now into the chat. Just put in my, maybe it's on the next slide. Check. Yeah, there it is. There's my contact information. So if you take a quick picture of that, if you want to get a hold of me, we can talk SWPs. We can talk about the SWP you're writing, maybe a template you want to accomplish. But thank you for your time. Thank you for being a part of Stormwater Awareness Week and putting up with me during my workshop. And we look forward to seeing you at one of the next workshops. So thank you, everybody.